if you're a genuine friend of this person, it's like, no, I'm not going to take no for an answer. Let's find a time. Let's go. Practically to say, what can I help you with in your home? What things are overwhelming you right now?
Well, welcome to a Sessions podcast, another episode as we continue walking through this Weeds in My Garden as we talk about mental health. And this is an additional resource to some of the things that are happening on our Sunday services, which you can check out at thecrossinglv.com. But we wanted to provide an additional resource with some mental health professionals to really dive deeper into some of these topics. And with me, I have Jennifer Antonucci and Mark Whelchel. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks.
We are continuing this. These conversations have been really helpful. And I'm excited as we continue to go that people will continue to be helped by it. I know that I have found myself referring back to them even as I've gone through my weeks, like, okay, I remember talking about this. And so I appreciate it. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about tonight. And so looking at the topic of depression and really diving into that. And so I guess where I would start is like, if I'm asking myself, Am I depressed? How do I know? What does depression look like?
Right. Yeah. It's different than just a bad day. I mean, we all have down days. We have days where we're just lacking energy or feeling down. Clinical depression, one of the things that sets it apart is the length of it. It's lasting a lot longer. Generally 2 weeks or longer. And then there's some very specific symptoms that come with depression. The first is feeling depressed almost all day, every day for more than 2 weeks. Another is essentially not finding pleasure in much of anything.
Okay.
And truly, to be diagnosed with depression, you would have to have like 5 symptoms that would include one of those, along with like weight gain or weight loss, trouble sleeping, inappropriate guilt, suicide ideation, and others. So, it's several things all coming together that really make it hard for you to do life and go to work or maintain relationships.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember just overhearing a conversation recently and with maybe the rise of kind of mental health awareness, I think as a society, we're more aware of these issues, right? And we've got the internet at our fingertips. And so I think a lot of us are more apt to self-diagnose, which sometimes I think might be helpful, but sometimes can get us into a little bit of trouble, right? Where we're not actually, so like, oh no, that's not just one thing. There's a whole slew of things that in combination kind of lead into depression.
Absolutely.
Like Mark's saying, there's certain criteria that has to be met for a certain amount of time. And so it's not just like, yeah, I'm having a bad day. It's like, oh, this is going on and on and on. For me personally, I started experiencing depression when I was about 13. And this was back in the 80s. And so depression wasn't really popular to talk about.
Right.
So I just thought everyone felt sad. Everyone kind of slept all day, cried all the time. And from 13 until 19, that's how I lived my life. And I didn't know any different. And it wasn't until I was 19, I met my now husband, and he led me into a relationship with Jesus. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't normal living. There's no joy. There's no hope, peace, none of that. And so, depression's a real thing.
Yeah.
That for a lot of us who are older, we didn't even know what it was until more recently.
Yeah. Would you say maybe it's both? It probably is. But is depression? Is it more of a? Is it a slide into depression? Is there a or a increase in amount, or a kind of like I said, a slide into it, or is it more like I woke up one day and I was depressed, and I from that point on, I just kind of couldn't get out of it. What do people normally experience in that?
Yeah, I think most people, it is more like a slide into depression. It's possible that somebody could have a traumatic event or a huge loss that just triggers them in a more sudden way. But typically, it's going to be over a period of time that they just get to this place where they realize I'm depressed.
Okay. Oh, and so then as you're looking at that, are there certain factors that drive depression? Is it circumstances? Is it within our own biology? Is it just a matter of mental fortitude? What are some of those things that drive depression in our lives?
Yeah, I think it's the model is called like a biopsychosocial spiritual. And so
Cool,
it's kind of like
everything.
everything, right? Like it's all included. And I think it's different for every person, depending on the person and
Right.
what they've experienced and how they're functioning. For some, it's a chemical imbalance. For others, it's pervasive depression, sadness, sorrow.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to somebody speak about depression a while ago, and they used an illustration that I thought was very helpful. If you've ever flown and you've looked at the back of the airline magazine and you see all these hubs of where this airline goes, and it gets quite intricate. And the point that this speaker was making was that if something happens on the East Coast, say there's a snowstorm and airports are shut down and there's some other weather-related thing, eventually it starts to affect the West Coast, and everything starts to kind of go crazy, if you will, based on one or two things. There's a domino effect, and he was relating that to depression. You know, in our brain we have like 100 billion neurons, you know, that each are connected to 10,000 neurons. So there's like 1,000 trillion connections. And when one, thing happens, it can affect this part of the brain, which can then, now I don't feel like getting up in the morning, and now my nutrition is off, and now, I'm avoiding friends. And so you just have this kind of snowball effect that one thing started affecting all the others.
Right.
And I think that's the way depression works quite often.
Quite often. Wow. So as you're kind of, if maybe I'm feeling okay, I'm looking at myself, I've been depressed for a lengthy amount of time. What are some of those things now? I find myself in that state. What do I do? What do I do now?
Yeah. How do I get help?
Yeah.
There's a lot of options, which is really encouraging. Some of it starts with just getting up and getting outside and doing. I like to think of it as little small bursts. So set a timer for 15 minutes and say, in these 15 minutes, I'm going to clean the house. Only in these 15 minutes. It's basically like baby steps to get you moving. So get outside, exercise, diet has contributing factors, making sure you're eating a lot of proteins, a lot of whole grains, fruits and vegetables. What else?
Yeah, I think it's important to go get a good physical, check out other things that may be contributing, thyroid, hormones, things of that nature.
Get some blood work done.
Yes.
Go visit the doctor, do those things.
And get a good checkup. People help a lot. And quite often, in fact, it's typical, we tend to want to withdraw when we feel depressed. But as Jen was saying, just bursts of things, just making yourself, even if you don't really feel like it, getting out, going out with a friend, having coffee with someone. Again, exercise, being outside, being around people that care about you and that you care about. That community is important.
Well, do you guys have any tips? Because what in moments where I don't know that would have ever met the criteria for clinical depression, but I have been like severely down. How about that?
Sure.
And I've been around other people who have experienced depression. I think one of the things is like everything feels hard, right?
Yes.
Right.
Everything feels hard. And so do you have any tips of like, okay, like get outside, but like, or reach out to the act of like reaching out to a friend
Yes.
feels almost impossible.
Right.
And so do you have any tricks to like, this is how you can start to even just take any action?
I like to reward myself and so even thinking, okay, what do I love? Ice cream, okay, if I do this, then I can have some ice cream. It's kind of like, okay, I got to do this. I don't want to do this, but I need to do this. So it's that intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
Also, one of the verses that really ministered to me when I became a Christian at 19 was Psalm 40, verses 1-3. It's the concept that we're in a pit and that God hears us and pulls us out, puts our feet on a new firm foundation, gives us a new song to sing. And so prayer, journaling, gratitude journals, connecting to God, worship music. If you're a Christian, those things can motivate, can bring you life, can transform your heart and your mind.
Wow. Yeah.
And I would add, all of those things are predicated on the idea that there's some hope that if we do these things, if we take these steps, that it will help. And so when I'm working with clients that are struggling with depression, that's usually where I start, is that there has to be at some level this belief that if I do some of these things, it will help. Because typically people feeling depressed feel like nothing's going to help. I just feel stuck and nothing will be helpful. But that kind of cultivating hopefulness that this will help. Just take some small steps and challenging just, small bursts of activity forward.
I love the way you worded that, of cultivating hopefulness.
Yeah.
That it is something. It reminds me of, like, trying to grow a plant, right? Hope isn't some weeds. Where this thing is titled "Weeds in Our Garden." Weeds happen, no problem. Growing like pretty things or fruitful things, that actually takes some work, some cultivation around it. And the same is probably true of our lives, that we have to cultivate hope and work at that sometimes, and be mindful of it when we're doing that.
Yeah. Now, most of the things that we've talked about up to this point are actions, right?
Right.
The other huge piece of trying to help with depression is changing our thoughts. I don't know, Jen, if there's some things.
Yeah, I think those automatic negative thoughts, I think we talked about that when we talked about anxiety, it's figuring out, what am I thinking? Are they good? Are they bad thoughts? Are they true? Are they lies? To what extent are they true? And then figuring out, what's true, and how do you replace those negative thoughts with positive ones? People who are depressed typically aren't thinking really positive, happy thoughts.
Right. Yeah. And so they tend to look at things through a very dark lens. And, one of the ways I try to think about it is if you think of a road, and everything on the left side of the road are things that are genuinely negative, that, we go through hard things, and there are negative things that we face almost every day. But everything on the right side is everything that is good. And every day, both are there. People who are depressed tend to think it's all negative. And so part of the change that you're trying to get to is that they're both exist all the time. We do get to choose the side that we look at. One of my favorite verses is Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true and noble and right and pure and lovely, admirable, excellent, think about these things. Paul is exhorting us to think about the good things in life, because it helps us and it glorifies God.
In our conversation so far, and I think this is a thought that we keep coming back to, is that there is always kind of this underlying assumption that because we think it's true.
Right.
And that is absolutely not true.
No.
And so trying to train ourselves that just because we think it doesn't make it true. Mm-hmm. And there are sources, whether that is within, our context of a church and people who are following Jesus. We have sources of what God has said, the Bible, those things. But we also have sources of community, people in our lives. And even looking back at our past, well, has that always been true? Mm-hmm. No, that hasn't always been true. So maybe it won't always be true, those kinds of things. But the practice of actually evaluating our thoughts, and trying to be mindful of that, is something that we have to be aware of enough to know.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's where counseling comes in and is really helpful, to have an unbiased person who can really help you to see things from a different perspective, or to discern what's true, what isn't true. It's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as you're talking about it, I think a lot of times we would come in and say, is the counselor going to fix me? Right? I'm here for you.
My magic wand.
I'm here for you to fix me. You'd probably say, no, that's not what I'm doing at all. That's not what I do on a daily basis.
Right.
Instead, I am being this kind of unbiased. I'm helping you to navigate through some of these things in
and
your
helping
own
you
life.
figure it out with God.
Right. Man, that's so good.
Yeah.
Now, let's say, we have somebody that's in our lives who is experiencing depression or going through a season of depression, maybe has been diagnosed in that. What are some of the helpful things that someone who isn't in that season can do for someone that they're connected to that is depressed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think it's the simple, practical things. When you call and invite them out to coffee. Now, I would say expect that they'll say, no, I'm too tired, or they'll have some excuse, and be persistent. If you're a genuine friend of this person, it's like, no, I'm not going to take no for an answer. Let's find a time. Let's go. Practically to say, what can I help you with in your home? What things are overwhelming you right now that I can help get you started? Come and help you with some home projects, or just getting things cleaned up, or whatever that is. So just some practical things, certainly praying with them as well, inviting them to go to church with you.
I think one of the things so obviously my husband has been my biggest support through my depression journey. And the thing that he does that's best for me is just to listen. He's not trying to fix me. He's not trying to make everything better. He gives me time and space. He allows me to talk to him, and he just listens. And it's really helpful, because sometimes with depression, it's so isolating and you feel so alone. And so just to have somebody who's going to listen, support you, love you, it's like the best thing you can do.
Okay, that brings up a topic I didn't know that we were going to get here, but I think this is important, which is that I don't think a lot of us, and myself included, I don't think that we know how to listen.
Yeah.
That's not a skill that comes naturally to us.
Right.
We know how to respond, but we don't necessarily know how to listen.
Yep.
And so as two people who are trained mental health professionals who spend their days listening,
We're paid to listen.
We are.
What makes a good listener? How could I be a good listener?
I think first would be don't talk.
Stop talking.
Stop talking.
The first key to listening is to stop talking.
What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good start.
Sounds good.
One of the things that comes to my mind and that I try to do often is just trying to get, what is the emotion under this? What is this person feeling at this time? That helps you hone in to more than just the words, but to what's going on in the heart underneath. Are they sad right now? Are they anxious? That helps us to listen better. I think a heart of empathy as well. That I'm trying to care about what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're going through. And I think that causes us to hone in on what they're saying.
I think asking good questions, like, what does it feel like? And then again, not to
and then stop
just
talking.
Letting them say, it feels like I'm in a pit by myself and it's dark and I'm hopeless. And then wow, okay, I get that, because we all get that. We understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think staying in a curious stance too, just always staying curious, like what else is there? What else is going on? Which leads to good questions.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the things that my husband asked me, so typically with me, like I shared in the first podcast, the anxiety and the depression. So for me, there's always an underlying fear. And so he'll say to me, what is your fear telling you right now? Which is a great question. It's become kind of a joke now, where it's lost its meaning with us. I'm just like, stop. But it's a great question. What is your fear telling you right now? What is your sadness saying to you? Like, what's going on? Like Mark said, underneath, what is happening inside of you?
And as you're talking about those questions, a lot of times I would say when I've been in that, or I've had those conversations, sometimes people genuinely don't know. Like and so even asking that question takes a little bit of time for them to try and dig underneath that. And it is really a process of a journey in that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So if depression in most people ends up, whether, yes, of course, there's traumatic events or some other things that may just set off into depression, but if it is most of the time a slide, is there anything that you can do to notice maybe one or two of those things before you've slidden all the way down into depression? Is there any way to kind of take notice and to try and back that train up a little bit?
I think noticing some of the symptoms. So it's like things that you used to want to do. Now it's like, I don't know that I want to go do that. So noticing the emotions that you're feeling before they've gotten, all the way down, changes in spending time with friends, in just how you feel physically, just noticing all those things in your body to go, wait a minute, something's going on that I need to attend to
pay attention to.
Yeah. For me, you can always tell because of sleep. So back when I was between 13 and 19, I'd literally sleep 16 hours a day. And I love to sleep, so that's easy for me. But that's not normal or healthy or good. And so I know my husband knows if you start sleeping like 12, 13 hours, you're starting to slip. And then because he's so supportive and encouraging, knows how to get me out of that. Okay, let's get up. Let's go do something fun. And so he kind of gets me out of the slip.
Yeah.
It's really helpful to have a supportive person.
Right.
So my prayer would be that everybody would have, whether it's your spouse or a friend or a parent, that is in tune enough to know and can kind of see the signs.
And help you and kind of step in when you, and at least ask the question.
Yes.
Hey, what's happening right now?
Yep.
And being once again, being a listener and being curious in that. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really good conversation around depression, and we have, this is an additional resource, and we have some more additional resources that we want to make available to you. So if you were to go to thecrossinglv.com/mental health, you'll see some of those resources. Some of those include like a referral list of counselors, and these two are on that referral list. So if that's something that's a part of that, there's music, there's thoughts on there, there's the rest of our podcast episodes. So you could check that out at thecrossinglv.com/mental health. Thank you guys for being a part of this episode.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you on the next one.